Dear colleagues, the topic of my talk today is Euergetism and benefaction in ancient Olbia from 4th century BC to the 4th century AD. I would like to begin by saying that practice of benefaction or charity in the Greek polis of the Mediterranean and the Black Sea reflects a special system of relations within civil collectives. Such ties been to be clearly traced in the Olbian polis in the 4th century BC. But I will start with a brief explanation of modern approaches to the definition of the Euergetism. Then I will pay attention to the territorial location of Olbia and some prehistory of charitable activity in Olbia in the 6th and 5th century BC. And after that, I will have a detailed review of the features of benefaction of Olbian polis elite. In modern studies, charity in the Mediterranean and Black Sea polis refers to the practice of providing various benefits to the state by wealthy and noble persons, which was called euergetia. Euergetia or euergetism from the Greek, it means good, beneficial, and ergesia, work or deed. In this regard, the book Benefactions and Rewards in the Ancient Greek City, The Origins of Euergetism by Mark Domingo Gidax is really particularly interesting. Very interesting book is wrote by Ariane Zuderhoek. He notes that the term Euergetism is a neologism invented by modern ancient historians. It was first used in a work by Boulanger on Aelius Aristide and the Sophists in Asia Minor, and by Marou in his well-known study of Greek and Roman education. But the greatest contribution to the development of this term was made by Paul Vane with his fundamental research, and a little later by Philippe Gautier. Contribution of this, word itself derives from the Greek euergetes or benefactor, an honorific title awarded to generous elite individuals, which were frequently encountered in inscriptions, and from the phrase euergetein ten polin. It means making a benefaction to the city. The practice of charity was actively involved in the social life of Mediterranean and the Black Sea Greek polis. This phenomenon was mainly characteristic of periods with the most difficult economic and military political situations. Benefactors of the polis carried out their good deeds arbitrarily according to exciting needs, for example, in the form of liturgies or regularly by serving their duties as magistrates. Hans notes that one of the prominent ways of acquiring honor within the social or political group was by providing public services, and neither Greek and Roman did not shy away from the fact that this was an essential motive of their benefactors. Decrees in honor of prominent cities of Olbia allow us to trace tendencies of charity in the northern Black Sea region. The biggest amount of honorary decrees was found in the Olbian Agora or near the main temples. And in this regard, the collections of inscriptions are of particular importance. It's collection of inscriptions by Latashov and inscriptions Olbia, and inscriptions published by Karishkovsky. And I want to tell you that Greek contribution to the study of Olbian epigraphy and the same little part of Euergetism was made by Yuri Vinogradov. As I told about Petr Karishkovsky, Andrei Beletsky, Askol Divanchik, Anna Rusyeva, Heinen, Haniotis, and however, Euergetia in the Olbian polis is still not fully studied. And I set myself the goal of analyzing the available information about the benefaction activities of the elite in Olbia on the basis of honorary decrees, and showing the determination of this phenomenon against the background of the historical context in Olbia, and presenting a model for analyzing this phenomenon in the Northern Black Sea region as a whole. In the beginning, I want to tell you some words about the Olbia and prehistory of charitable activity in Olbian polis. Olbia was located in the territory of the Black Sea coast, as you see, and its location is mentioned by Herodotus, Dion Chrysostom, Strabon, Pliny, and many other ancient authors. The first immigrants from Ionia, in particular from the Asia Minor city Miletus, appeared in this territory in the second half of the 6th century. In the 7th century BC, the city of Olbia itself was founded at the turn of the 7th, at the beginning of the 6th century BC, on the right bank of Bug estuary, in the area of modern village of Parutina, Mykolaiv region in Ukraine. Unlike three other significant polis of the Northern Black Sea region, it's Tiras, modern Belgorod, Dnistrovsky, Chersonesos, Sevastopol, Pantikapaeum, modern Kench, which continued their history in the Middle Ages. Olbia ceased to exist in the 4th century AD. For almost 1,500 years, the city was forgotten and destroyed by time, and what survived was dismantled by the Turks during the constructions of the nearby Ochakir fortress. The final blow to the ruins of Olbia was inflicted by the inhabitants of the village Parutina, who completely dismantled the remains of ancient structures at the beginning of the 19th century. This situation greatly complicates the proper archaeological study of the era. About the process of formation of Olbian society and elites, at first I want to tell you that rich archaic burials from Olbia showed that wealthy first settlers formed a local aristocracy, and the next generations of citizens descends from them. A group of first colonists was always headed by an euerget who had unlimited power. This group was strictly disciplined, united, and actually represented a small civil community. The rich burials of the archaic period from Olbia show that in the colonized territory, the wealthy first colonists made up a layer of the local aristocracy, and the next generation of citizens descended from them. Such a tradition was very characteristic of the Milesian colonization. Like most of the Pontic polis founded by Miletus, Olbia originally had an oligarchic form of government, but which soon became democratic, and according to the modern researchers, it was in the 4th century BC. The graffiti on one side of the 6th century BC amphora, the so-called letter of the priests, and the text of the lead plates, the so-called letters of Achillodoros, Apaturios, and Articon, testify that wealthy and noble Olbian citizens already owned houses, slaves, and a lot of other property in that period. the Olbian aristocracy used the same name as the representatives of the upper stratum of Miletus aristocracy, Eponymus Molps Aesimnetai. The next group of additional colonists, Epoikoi, were significantly limited in their rights compared to the first settlers and obeyed the already established rules and laws. The civil community was consolidated thanks to the common deities revered, and its further development depended on solidarity within the community. The origins of philanthropical activity in Olbia are connected with the emergence of religious aristocratic unions, thiasoi, molpoi, and bareikai in the polis. Testimony about the introduction of Apollo Delphinius cult in Olbia in the third quarter of the 6th century BC allowed Anna Rusyeva to draw a conclusion regarding the emergence thiasoi of molpoi at the same time in the city. The thiasos of molpoi was the oldest aristocratic male union associated with the fulfillment of sacred duties in the cult of Apollo Delphinius in Miletus. The essence of the duties consisted in an organization and conduct of the most important religious ceremonies by the members of the board. The members of Molpoi Union in Olbia were not only of aristocratic origin, but also possessed considerable financial funds. They were engaged in the organization of sacred rites, and every year during the replacement of their aesymnet, they brought statues, marble dedication plates, and columns as a gift to the patron of the city, Apollo Delphinius. Olbian graffiti also testify to the existence of Apollo Boreas cult in the polis, as well as a religious union associated with it, which existed here from the 6th century BC. Bareikai thiasoi was also transferred to Olbia from Miletus, where a corresponding field existing in Archaic period. Olbian graffiti of the 3rd century BC with the name of Bareikai thiasos members allow us to assume the aristocratic nature of this religious union and to state that for a long period of time, its activity was connected with the organization of religious life in the Olbian polis. For comparison, let's note the inscriptions of the 1st century BC and 1st century AD from Histria, which shows that a large number of benefactions of this polis belong to Bareikai phylum. The time of the emergence and activity of Molpoi and Bareikai thiaso allows us to assume that such form of benefaction or liturgy as Hestiasis already existed in Olbia in the 6th century BC. Hestiasis was the organization of religious festivals and public treats after the sacrifices. Let us emphasize the term liturgia, which is mentioned in the Olbian inscriptions from this time and should be understood as a fulfillment of certain duties due to the certain necessity. Starting from the 3rd and 2nd century BC, the priests of Apollo Delphinius temple were engaged in the organization of religious festivals and public treats in Olbia. Most of them were benefactors, and in the text they are called euergets of the polis. A favorable factor in this case was the existence of wealthy priestly families in Olbia, where the duties of priests were inherited. The family of Hevresibiades, according to the prosopographical study of Stolba, for example, 26 people in Olbia during the period from the 6th century BC to the 2nd century AD were named Hevresibios. So it's really was very big family with a long time existence. And the other family was the family of Dionysus, the son of Dionysus. And from the 2nd century BC, the priest family, which included Eubiotus, the son of Ariston, and Timo, daughter of Hypsicreonted. And you can see the name of many of these members of elite families. However, the tradition of performing the Hestiasis liturgy by members of Olbian religious unions was continued in the Hellenistic period. For example, in inscriptions of the 4th and 3rd century BC attests to the Olbian Theasos of the Hevresibiades priests. And according to Bilecki, these inscriptions show us that benefactions of these priests was made because of like philotimia. It was their ideology of benefactions of this early time. And in these inscriptions, we can see the term philogaphos. It was the person who organized the cult or sacred meals. In this case, the term philotimia or piety is of great importance, as it was intended to demonstrate the voluntariness of this liturgy and popularize charity among citizens. Similar attempts to stimulate the liturgical activity of citizens were a characteristic phenomenon in many Greek polis during the Hellenistic time. And you can see the same many names of the very rich people who made these benefactions due, like philotimia. The analysis of proxeny and honorary decrees allows us to say that such type of charity as epidosis, it means voluntary donations, was very popular in the Olbian polis in the 6th and 5th century BC. Both wealthy foreigners and Olbiopolites were involved in such donations. It should be emphasized that we do not observe official texts with gratitude from civil society to their benefactors in the early stages of polis history. The first incentive gifts to individuals who were engaged in charity activities in Olbia are related to the granting of proxeny to foreigners. The position of benefactor, like euerget, gave foreigners a special status in Olbian polis. Several proxeny decrees related to the financial assistance of Olbia from foreigners, for example, from the inhabitants of Sinope and Heraclea Pontica, date back to the 5th century BC. In general, 27 proxeny fall on the pre-Getae period of Olbian history, and only around 11 on the period of the 1st century AD. It should be noted that it's not clear for what exactly foreign benefactors were honored for before the 3rd century BC. At first decrees do not contain any mentions of the specific merits of Xenes, to the polis, and the wording of their rights was typical. Foreigners received proxini, politia, atelia, free entry and exit from the harbor and in peacetime and wartime. But in the honorary proxini decrees of the 3rd century BC, it's already reported that Hellenicus from Rhodes was honored for the large amount of funds that he provided for public sacrifices in Olbia. And an honorary decree of Olbiopolitans of the last third of the 3rd century BC in honor of Hersonicides Apollonius and his sons also reports on the significant financial assistance that foreigners provided to the polis. Kaimehala Euergetica ten polem. It was noting that as a gratitude to the good men for their benevolence, the council and people of Olbia decided to crown them with a golden wreath, declare their coronation at the Dionysia in the theatre, invited them to the front rows among other benefactors, treat them literally invited to a treat in the temple of Apollo, and install an honorary stele and portrait reliefs in honor of these outstanding foreigners from Chersonesus. Also like to note that this text consists of several fragments. I would like to note that the period of the 5th and 3rd centuries BC was the time when the largest number of proxenae were granted in Olbia. Started from the 3rd and 2nd centuries BC, the tradition of glorifying foreign benefactors for their help was taken over by the temple of Apollo Delphinius, which supported the custom of arranging public meals with the participation of foreigners. During this period in the Pontic region, proxenae practically do not differ from honorary inscriptions, and the character of relations between citizens and foreign benefactors as a ritualized friendship is strengthened. Gradually, proxenae became formal and turned into an instrument to express diplomatic courtesy and honor foreigners for their benevolence, rather imaginary than real. In this way, epigraphic sources from this period, namely the proxenae decrees, testify to emergence of the first benefactors in Olbia in the form of wealthy foreigners. It should be emphasized that the establishment of a permanent democratic system in Olbia took place apparently within the first quarter of the 4th century BC. This led to the spread of Hellenic traditions among a wider strata of the population, including the Hellenized local tribes. However, it should be noted that the union with common Greek cultural center, which supported Hellenic way of life and ideology in Olbia, was possible thanks to the polis elite. It's natural that in all Olbian official decrees from the different chronological period emphasize the adherence to antiquity, traditions, and customs of ancestors. In this regard, the decree of the 4th century BC honoring an unknown Olbian citizen and pointing out his adherence to the precepts of the fathers, it means katata patria, is very indicative. And 2 Olbian decrees of the 2nd and 3rd century AD praising fellow citizens for following the glory of their ancestors, officially confirms the desire to preserve traditional Hellenic ideas even at those old times. Starting from the 4th century BC, local benefactions were honored for providing public services to the city and engaged in its urban improvement. It should be noted that in this period, there was a tradition of proclamation decrees in honor of citizens who have distinguished themselves in some way, tightly connected with the establishment of sustainable democracy in Olbia. The largest number of euergets of the Olbian polis can be traced to this period of the 1st and 2nd century BC. It should be said that the spread of this tradition was not exclusively Olbian. It was a pan-Greek and whole Greek phenomenon that affected in the Northern Black Sea region as well. I would like to analyze some of the most important inscriptions of this period. First of all, this is a decree in honor of Kallinikos in Xenos, which shows that in 330-320 BC, this outstanding citizen provided numerous services to the city, increased the income of the polis, established the maintain of copper coins, carried out the cassation of debts, and pacified the demos. For his benevolence, he was awarded an honorary decree where it was noted that the good deeds were done by him for the sake of philotimia. In addition, he was awarded a large monetary reward of 1,000 gold coins and bronze, probably equestrian statue. Kallinikos' coronation with a wreath should have been announced during the Dionysia in the theatre. This form of reward was considered very honorable in Greek cities and was given to persons who had distinguished themselves in providing services to the polis. In Athens, for example, the announcement of the merits of such persons usually took place in the theatre during the Great Dionysia. Examples of the coronation of outstanding personalities in the theatre during the Dionysia are also known in the Black Sea region, for example, in Chersonesos and in Mesembria. In Olbia itself, the proclamation in the theatre during the Dionysia probably took place more than once, since it's also mentioned in the decree of the last third of the 3rd century BC in honor of the son of Apollonius from Chersonesos. The dedicatory inscriptions or honorary inscriptions of the on the pedestal of the statue is dated to the first half of the 3rd century BC. According to its text, the citizens of Olbia honored the euerget Pantacles, the son of Cleombrotus. It was ton Euergetes. The text does not report on the specific actions of this Olbian benefactor, but he was honored with a bronze statue for his outstanding services to the polis. 2 decrees mentioned that son of Pantacleus Cleombrotus, who built the tower and his own expense, dedicating it to Heracles and the people of Olbia, and also rebuilt part of the vault. Thus, it can be stated that tradition of euergesia in individual families of Olbia was passed down from generation to generation, and this indicates a certain aristocracy of the political life of the polis at that time. The decree in honor of Protogens, it's really the most famous decree in the Northern Black Sea coast. Mentioned that in 220-210 BC, Protogen, during the economic crisis, redeemed the pledged sacred gifts, provided citizens with bread and wine, and also organized embassies. It's noted that he took part in the embassy of King Saitapharnes. Protogens was engaged in urban improvement of the city, completed the defensive walls, repaired the public ships that carried building stone, repaired the granary, calmed the demos with reasonable advice during the nomadic invasion, forgave the debts of the people, and lent 1,500 golden coins at the expense of future income before taking offices in the board of the Nine, which was engaged in the construction and repair of buildings. It should be noted that usually the provision of funds of the city before taking services was a characteristic phenomenon in the democratic polis of the classical period. On the contrast, benefactor protogens did it in the 3rd century BC in the conditions of a difficult economic situation in Olbia during the crisis. And inscriptions dedicated to Apollo Delphinius on behalf of his grandson Eumenes testifies that Protogenes and members of his family, despite the danger from the Nomadians, did not leave the city and continued to do benefactions. The decree in honor of Protogenes indicates that he carried out his actions based on honor and duty to civil society, saying that for him there is nothing more precious than the favor of the people. Let us focus on the fact that such a statement is not accidental, since a lot of honorary decrees of the Hellenistic period note the attitude of the honored person to society. It means to koinon, and it's noted. The next person and next decree is the decree of the first half of the 2nd century BC in honor of Nicerat, the son of Papios, shows that all the actions of the citizen were aimed to do the good for their fatherland or motherland. Nicerat, a valiant citizen, died while defending the citizens of Olbia at Hylleia, where they were holding games, agones, in honor of Achilles, for which he was posthumously awarded an honorary degree. Not only did he save the fellow citizens, but also ensured the safety of the city by repelling the attack of the enemy, settled the dispute between Olbia and Chersonesos, gave wise advice to the citizens. Nicerat was the only citizen of Olbia to be honored with 2 statues, one of which was equestrian and an honorary bust. In addition, for the first time in the history of the Olbian community, a citizen was honored with an annual posthumous award with a wreath and eternal proclamation by the herald during the equestrian competition in honor of Achilles. The installation of equestrian statues and proclamations during competitions were traditionally made in honor of those citizens who organized this competition or personally participated in them. Similar decrees dedicated to the organizers of religious festivals with competitions, it's agonathetes, are known among inscriptions from the Black Sea region, for example, from the Black Sea Tiras, from the western part, it's Histria. A decree of the late 4th, early 3rd century BC from Tiras mentions the duties of agonathetes to oversee the announcements of awards during the festivals. The honorary decree of the 2nd and 1st century BC from the Histria glorifies the rich citizen Aristagoras, son of Apaturios, who, among other liturgies, was involved in the organization of festivals. This allows us to assume that Nicerat performed the agonathesia liturgy in Olbia. And I want to tell you that, repeat maybe, that agonathesia, it was the organization of competitions, agonas. The posthumous proclamation, crowning, installation of statues, and stela with a honorary degree testify to emergence of tendency to heroize citizens who were particularly distinguished by their benefactions in Olbia. According to the text of the Olbian decree, the process of Nicerat's funeral had to take place under special conditions in accordance with the greatness of the fallen hero. Benches and workshops were closed. Citizens in mourning clothes walked in an orderly procession. The decree in honor of Nicerat reflects the desire of a representative of the Olbian aristocracy for philanthropy and polis patriotism. As a defender of the city and an euerget who rationally spent his money or charity, according to the text of the decree, he calls everyone to follow the path of piety. It means philotimia. The inscription mentions the nobility of his origin and the preservations of Euergetia tradition from his ancestor. Ton apo progonon Euergeten onta. It means the one who was a benefactor from his ancestors. It should be noted that all the decrees of the 4th and 2nd centuries BC emphasize the noble origin of the local benefactors of Olbia and reflect their benevolence. However, the council and the people on whose behalf these decrees were issued do not grant their benefactors a separate status that would distinguish them from other fellow citizens. The term euerget, which is often used in honorary decrees of the Hellenistic period, was not a title and did not correspond to the duty of wealthy citizens. As the text states, such people voluntarily agreed to numerous expenditure of personal funds and protection of the homeland and other citizens. The reason for the philanthropic activity of Olbian elite, which is repeatedly noted, was philotimia, piety, often combined with political patriotism as well as certain expectation of approval from the fellow citizens, epainos. It's important to emphasize that activity of Olbian euergets during the Hellenistic period took place under the dominance of Mithridates' sixth-pater state over the Black Sea region and under the constant external threat from nomadians, Geta, Scythians, Sarmatians. Therefore, apparently the main reason for polis patriotism of the euergets was the desire to preserve the independence of the polis as well as their own lives and property. The approval that benefactors expected of the fellow citizens was manifested in the glory of the good citizen and its material expressions, wreaths, statues, portraits. In addition, it was to a certain extent similar to the institution of social insurance for wealthy citizens within the civil society. The second period of the development of Euergetia in Olbia is connected with Roman time, which lasted from the 1st to the 4th century AD. And during the 1st centuries AD, when Olbia was recovered after the Getae invasion, the constructions of temples, public and private buildings at their own expense of citizens, wealthy foreigners, as well as those Olbiapolitans who had the rights of Roman citizenships, became widespread. Such voluntary donations for the needs of the city became quite popular, considering that both citizens and, if necessary, foreigners were involved in them. In such a way, the gymnasium was reconstructed, for example, and the portic was built in Olbia from the private financial. And honorary decrees testified to the fact that the funds of the magistrates were actively used for the needs of the Olbian polis. 8 inscriptions reports about the charitable activity citizens in Olbia, and it means the boards of archons and strategists, which restored the defensive wall and temples in their own expenses. The board of strategists rebuilt the triclinium, dedicating it to Apollo Prostatus, in whose sanctuary ceremonial feasts were held. Citizens of Olbia who had the rights of Roman citizenships were also involved in the city reconstructions. In particular, Aurelius Julian built temples to the gods Serapis and Isis, Asclepius and Hygia, as well as Poseidon, all at his own expenses. And a bathhouse dedicated to the Roman emperors was built in Olbia with private funds. And the inscriptions also indicates that the bathhouse was built with public funds, which were donations from wealthy citizens. The fact that a significant part of the city's benefactors mentioned in the honorary decrees were its magistrates is an important feature of Olbian civil life in the first centuries AD. It's necessary to note that representatives of 2 generations of the same family clearly stand out among the names of archon and strategist. Thus, the active use of personal funds of magistrates for the needs of the city indicates the concentration of power in the hands of wealthy citizens of the Olbian polis. 10 dedications of archons and strategists boards of the 2nd and 3rd centuries AD testify that organization of festivals and rites in the cults of the polis gods became a permanent form of charity. Members of these boards were obliged to take care of the compliance with the cult of Achilles norm and the organization of festivals in his honor. The public feasts and sacred competitions in which magistrates took part themselves. 2 wealthy families that were associated with the administration of the city. It was for example, Callisphen, the son of Callisthenes, and Dadas, son of Herasonte, and I will show you these inscriptions a little later. And in this time, in the 1st centuries AD, organization of embassies is often mentioned in inscriptions as a benefactions of the Olbian elite. The organization of embassies, architheoria, at the personal expense of citizens has been known in Olbia since from the time of Protogens, from the 3rd century BC, but in the 1st centuries AD, we know about Carzases, the son of Attalus, which voluntarily performed liturgies required for the state, and also carried out errands and in embassies to neighboring kings. Prominent Olbian euergets of the 2nd and 3rd centuries AD volunteered to organize embassies. They were Theocles, son of Satyras, Poseidonus, son of Satyros, Dadag, son of Padagas. And it should be noted that Yalenka cites the text of another decree close in time to Dadag's one, which mentions the participations of an Olbia citizen in the organization of embassies. So it was really big and widespread tradition in Olbia. The mentioned Theocles, son of Satyras, may have also performed a voluntary gymnasiarchia in the honorary decree dedicated to these citizens after his merits and the fact that he held the highest office in the statute 4 times. It was Archon's eponymous. Theocles mentioned as a trustee of the gymnasium, where his relief image was made. In the 1st century AD, gymnastic competition, as well as charity, became a mandatory feature of the aristocratic lifestyle. So the duties of gymnasiarch were often performed by persons who held a high social position and were among the main officials. Gymnasiarch with such a high social status are mentioned, for example, in inscriptions of the 2nd and 3rd century AD from the Tomis. And among the highest magistrates were also citizens who performed gymnasiarchia in Histria and Odessus. In general, this was a widespread phenomenon in the 1st centuries AD. According to the decrees of the 1st centuries AD, the euergets of this polis possess the nobility and dignity of their ancestors' origin. At the beginning of the decree dedicated to Theocles, the son of Satyras, and Callinicus, the son of Dadas, and Callisthenes, the son of Callisthenes, there are mentions about their glorious ancestors. And it's very interesting that about the Callisthenes, the son of Callisthenes, we have like 2 lines of generosity. At first, it's glorious of ancestors. It means that they have grandfathers from their and many other relatives from their ancestors, and other side, it's he was known even to the Augustus, and such citizens like Callisthenes, the son of Callisthenes, were officially awarded the title of euerget, benefactor, in decrees. It indicated the creation of a certain aristocratic group whose members actually glorified each other, but in addition, these texts were supposed to contribute to the development of fellow Oberpolitans' desire to compete with each other in services to motherland. Members of this aristocratic group often became the euergets of the polis a priori. And the honorific decree of the young man Dad, the son of Tumbagus, reports that he gave hopes for the public services execution in accordance with the dignity of his family. And for that, he was awarded an honorific degree and fellow citizens' prize. Most euergets made by decrees were protos, it was the first archons, who were eponymous of Olbia at some point. This fact is reflected both in epigraphic sources and in numismatics. The decree in honor of Callisthenes, the son of Callisthenes, of the 2nd century AD, mentions that he venerably and fairly served 4 times as the first archon eponym. Note that the first contact of the Olbian elite with Roman administration are indicated in the decrees of the 1st century AD in honor of Ababus, son of Callisthenes, and his son Orontes. Due to close contact of Olbian elite with the Roman authorities, the benefactors of the polis who stood near the top of the power received a new title of father of city. And it means in Greek patriotism, and accordingly a new status. Persons who received this status occupied a place after the governor of the Roman province, but before the first archon eponymous in the hierarchy of power. In the time of Septimius Severus, Callisthenes, the son of Callisthenes, was granted this honorary title for participate, advice, and valuable activities. It should be noted that he was also involved in the benefactions for poor fellow citizens. He spent his property, giving money to everyone in need, as much as they asked for. A fragmentary decree of the 2nd century AD reports on granting of the honorary title father of the city, patridi pater, to another Olbian citizen with an unknown name. It follows from the text that he was the cause of good for many and generally useful for the homeland. Voluntary performed liturgies met the Sarmatian skin and was sent as an ambassador to the Roman emperors. And similar honorary titles, father of city, son of the city, father of the homeland, were often given to Roman emperors and the most influential statements, who distinguished themselves by their benefactions for the civil society in the Pontic region. Thus, in the Roman period, the title of benefactor or euergetes acquired political significance. Euergetism, that is benevolent activity, became a special practice of a closed circle of people, which included representatives of the most noble and wealthy families of Olbia. The wealthy aristocracy acquires the status of polis political elite. Charity of wealthy citizens had a certain system, which included social and temple constructions in the city, and its urban improvement, organization of festivals and agons, it means competitions, it's agonathesia, maintenance of gymnasiarchia, arrangement of embassies, distribution of money. Euergetism in this period becomes a characteristic feature of society elites, which separated them from the main mass of citizens, especially prominent benefactors who had aristocratic origins and great political ambitions, received the title of benefactors of the homeland, patriotism polis, and a new status in the power hierarchy thanks to the contacts of the Olbian elite with the Roman administration. The gradual strengthening of Euergetism practice led to the emergence of certain ruling families during the Roman period. With the help of benefaction activities, Olbian elite tried to strengthen their position within the framework of Roman imperial policy in the Northern Black Sea region. So, thank you very much for your attention.